Bruce Springsteen has been hailed by critics as the best thing yet to happen in the 70s. His second album confirms that belief. John Landau said, "I saw a rock and roll future, and its name is Bruce Springsteen. He made me feel like I was hearing music for the very first time." His first album is titled Greetings from Asbury Park, and the second is The Wild, the Innocent, and the East Street Shuffle. Bruce Springsteen on Columbia Records.
Stephen, when did you first meet Bruce?
Well, that goes back a long way. Around 65 or so.
You were a New Jersey boy as well, eh?
Yeah. I was born in Boston, but I grew up in New Jersey, yeah.
So how did the two of you meet?
Oh, we had local bands. You know, he was at a Freehold, which was a bit further west. And I was closer to the ocean, and there was a bit of a circuit that everybody played, you know, and you'd run into each other, and then we started running into each other in New York, which was odd at the time.
You used to come into Greenwich Village, didn't you?
Yeah, on the weekends.
What, to see musicians? Or?
Yeah, because New York was usually about a year or so ahead of New Jersey, you know. And so we'd come in and steal what we could and go back and look brilliant.
When we met, this girl introduced me to him, who was a singer in the band I was in. And actually she said, "Come on, he's playing down the street. We can go down here and meet him tonight." And so I went down there, a place called the Student Prince.
Is this in Asbury Park?
In Asbury Park, yeah. It's no longer there. But I opened the door, and the wind blew the door down the street. It's a fact.
He came in the club, and he just walked up to the stage, and he said, "Can I play?" And I said, "Sure." You know, nobody was going to tell him no. You know, and he got up on stage and just knocked us out.
I get the thrill right now thinking about it. You know, I feel it, inside me. You know, that first night, the magic of that moment. And when I saw this guy, you know, I knew that there was something special about him. You know, I knew that he had what it takes, quote. And it was what I was looking for, you know.
I was with our old drummer, Vinny Lopez, and we were sort of we thought we were pretty hot in those days. We'd sort of go check out all the new talent in the area. We heard about this fellow, and we went to check him out. And we turned our chairs around and sat with our arms up there, and he blew us away. He was just he was unbelievable then, and I had never seen anything like him. I thought he was hidden away, like he was from England, or I had never heard of him, but he looked like a celebrity.
Well, I answered an ad in the New York newspaper in August of 1974. It said, "Wanted drummer." I went down and played with him, and I'll tell you, from the first beat, it was like magic. Just fell together.
He had just broken up Steel Mill, which was like a four-piece Led Zeppelin-based kind of band, and wanted to expand the band and go into a little more R&B direction. And at that point, they disbanded, and he wanted to start a new band. And I came in. I was working with Dave Sanchez in another band, and we sort of came in together, and that was the story.
On one of Bruce's tours before, I think Born to Run really broke big, at the Bottom Line in New York City, for the first time, I had a chance to see Bruce play. And it was his last night at a famous stand at the Bottom Line in New York City. And I was playing the next night. It was my first show as a solo artist. My band Green had broken up, so I was like petrified already. And I went to see Bruce just to kind of be inspired, which I certainly was. But it was just so overwhelming because, you know, the whole band and two keyboards and this little tiny club and doing this 4-hour show, and they did 2 shows. And as much as I loved it, halfway through the second show, I was so, like, you know, wrapped up in how great it was and so worried about my show and kind of inspired and overwhelmed at the same time. I left and went back to my hotel and just worked out all night, did sit-ups and all the kinds of exercise just to kind of wind down enough to, like, be grounded enough to do my show the following night. I was really knocked out.
I had seen him at Max's Kansas City here in New York, where he was playing for a few nights, and it so happened that the people I was working with at that time we were also playing the same club. We were alternating sets. So I watched him for 3 nights and got real excited about him. And of course I noticed he had a great piano player at the time, it was Davey. And I said, boy, this is a band I would just love to play with. And it so happened that about 8 months later, I'd been living up in Boston. I moved back to New York City, and I picked up the Village Voice one day and read the music ads. And there was an ad for Bruce Springsteen and the E Street Band, piano player and drummer wanted. So I reached for the phone, made the call, and I went down and auditioned.
First time I saw Bruce, he was opening up for Jethro Tull, Monmouth College, before he had a record deal. But I'd always heard of him because when
Sorry, did you go to see Jethro Tull, or did you go to see Bruce Springsteen?
He doesn't know this. I went to see him. I went to see Jethro Tull because I liked him at the time. But I also went to see Bruce because I was singing in that area, you know, in different bands. And I wanted to get in a good rock band, and I knew he had the best rock band.
Yeah, so they were the kind of ace team, were they, in the area?
Oh yeah, always. Even back where when I'd be in bands, and the guitar players would always. He was known as a real fast guitar player, and all the guitar players would try to emulate everything he did. Just like, oh, Springsteen plays so fast. But he always had a great reputation for being the best band.
Bruce Springsteen was on stage for an incredible 3 hours last night. He's at the Garden tonight and tomorrow, all sold out. Scalpers were getting $50 a seat last night, but Springsteen will be back in town next month. I have no more details, just the promise he will be back, and he's worth waiting for. I have heard just about everybody, but I've never heard anybody make rock and roll music like Bruce Springsteen.
What? Hit it again!
How do you keep that pace up? That was 3 solid hours.
I don't know. I really don't. You know, it's I'm not sure. You know, like I said, it must be desperation or something. You know, I don't know. So it's the thing. I guess probably the only thing that I live for. You know. You know, one of the initial things I want to have fun. You know, I just started out doing it for fun, and that's a big reason why I still do it. I'm lucky that I can make a living at it now. You know, and the day it stops being fun probably be the day I stop doing it. You know. If you want an audience, well, you gotta get off your ass. You gotta go get it, because you know they're not gonna come. Oh, hi, you know, walking around knocking on the door. Hey, oh, you're so great. You know, they're not gonna. You know, that's like a bunch of jive, man. You know, it's like if you want it, you better go take it. You better go work for it. You know, and that's what I'm interested in.
I think Bruce began to kind of realize that he spoke for the everyman, because he was the everyman. I mean, you look at his, upbringing, in New Jersey and so on. This is someone who comes from a very mundane, suburban, working class kind of background. And when Springsteen is doing his best work, it's when he's talking about those experiences, those things that people from that kind of background, can relate to. And that's, I think, kind of what created his audience. That's what people woke up to, was, wow, this person is like a spokesperson because he is one of us.
You can change people's lives and people's directions in some ways. You know, that's the best thing that you can do, and that's what happened to me when I first heard, the early rock and roll and stuff. That's what it did for me.
I don't think you can take the opportunity to perform away from Bruce Springsteen. I mean, if he had no opportunity to perform, he'd perform anyway, because that's at the end of the day, that's who he is. Yeah, he's a songwriter. Yeah, he's a recording act. Yeah, he's a great guy from New Jersey, but most of all, he's a performer. He is about the performance. And the records are an anticlimax to that, and they always will be.
He's a complete showman. Almost to the point of being crass about it. I mean, it's deliberately showman, it's almost vaudeville, some of what he gets up to, almost like a carnival barker at times. He brings an intensity of performance. It's almost unmatched. Bruce has a lot, and he shows no signs of slowing down with any of it either. He's really one of a kind as a performer. Every performer who ever comes along is usually called a new something or other. And Springsteen went through years of being called the new Bob Dylan. It's understandable. Very poetic singer-songwriters. There's absolutely no doubt that Bruce was influenced by Bob Dylan. Dylan was influenced by Woody Guthrie, and so it goes backwards, and that's how these things go. I think what Bruce had was he's got some of Dylan's kind of one man and his guitar singing about the working man, which Dylan did early on, and then he became his own person.
Well, he starts out really Woody Guthrie, like really Bob Dylan. I mean, there's a lot of comparisons that are drawn between him and Dylan. And they're obvious comparisons, but they're also slightly superficial because there's something fundamentally different about those two artists, and that's that there's something about the way that Bruce Springsteen weaves his narrative that makes it seem as though he's talking from personal experience, whereas Bob Dylan kind of has that kind of poetic detachment where he's telling a story but not necessarily his.
I think in those early days he was tremendously enjoying playing with words, and to some extent the wordplay was inspired by Dylan, just the sheer joy of messing about with words, producing multiple rhymes within a single line and all that kind of thing. But he, on the whole, he wasn't following Dylan's subject matter or anything like that.
Perhaps the first album is influenced by Dylan, well then the second album is influenced by Van Morrison. But with the third album, with Born to Run, he comes into his own voice. So it's a big musical departure from the first two albums in that he finds his own voice. While he's borrowing from Phil Spector's Wall of Sound, he finds his own, from a production value, he finds his own voice vocally and musically with Born to Run. There are a lot of comparisons that you can make between the wild romanticism of the second album and Born to Run. There's just like this epic grandeur in a lot of the songs on Born to Run that was also on the second album, but not so much musically, but from a production value standpoint, Born to Run is a much better made album. So that vision that he had, that epic quality to some of the songs, I think it's a little bit better realized on Born to Run because he's got better production value.
Like at the time of Born to Run, I was listening to a lot of Phil Spector and Dwayne Eddy and just your sort of traditional, like for me, a rock and roll guitar sound. That was, that was Dwayne Eddy, or that was like Peter Townsend, the chords, and I was not that blues influenced. I was never that into blues. I was into the soul stuff, into the R&B artists.
How did you react at the time to the promotion that CBS put behind Born to Run? Because it was a massive promotion campaign, wasn't it?
I think for those days it was, for 1975. What made it seem like a lot was the time of Newsweek covers, and it was a funny kind of thing. Plus, there was a lot written about it. There was a lot written in the press. There was not like a lot of ads. It was like something that it was just focused on by the media in general at that time. So it seemed like I think a bigger campaign than it was. It was a big thing.
Well, Born to Run obviously is the pivotal track of his career. It's, I think, undoubtedly one of his greatest songs, but it is a terribly difficult song. It never emerged from being difficult. It was horrendously difficult for them to record in the studio. They messed about with Born to Run for a year in a tiny little studio where they'd recorded the first couple of albums. And then when John Landau came on board and started to co-produce a bit before moving into being Bruce's manager, he moved them into, I think it was the record plant, all singing, dancing studio. And they tried it again and again. The strange thing is, with the recorded version, what happened is they went back to the first recording, but they tried for a solid year to improve on that first recording. It isn't an easy song, and the way he writes is never easy for the musicians, I think, partly because of this way he'll overwrite, if you like, and then insist on jamming stuff into the song, so he's constantly wrestling with the material. I've got to get this in here, It's like that. You feel, yeah, get in there. These are all crucial parts, got to be there, so he'll force it in kind of thing, and then sometimes I suppose the song goes blah and explodes on him, you know, and it's probably always like that any time he's going to play it with the band. It's just always a challenge. A lot of those songs he was writing back then are just always going to be a challenge like that. They've got a wildness about them.
Born to Run was a phenomenal success. It was also heavily hyped, especially in the UK. Maybe the first time we really all dealt with the word hype. It was all this, I've seen the future of rock and roll, and his name is Bruce Springsteen. Bruce had a tough time with that. He then ran into a lawsuit with his manager, stopped him recording and touring for a couple of years, at a point that you would expect him to come back with another album very quickly. I think it was almost 3 years before Darkness on the Edge of Town. And those kind of problems all show up in that album. I think to some extent that album is, I think if you look at Born to Run being an attempt to achieve the American dream, which is for most people fame and fortune, Darkness on the Edge of Town is an answer to that. It's the flip side of the American dream. It's actually examining the the negativity, and I think it's Bruce very, very quickly saying, you know, I may be a rock and roll star, I'm not going to give that up, but I don't want to be one of these kind of boys in the bubble. I don't want to be one of, I don't want to be removed. I want to be singing about the real world. And songs like the title track, Badlands, he really, there's stuff like that on his first 3 albums, but I think he recognized the darkness in the world at large, and I think especially in his own fame. And I think there was a decision made that early on that he was not going to just go and become some removed, distant superstar.
What happened was we had 3 years where we were out of commission really because of the legal thing. But during that time, we were doing small tours. We toured down south, and we toured the Midwest, and different parts of the country. And that's how we were keeping everybody, staying alive, keeping the band, paying everybody's rent and everybody's, things they needed. And so we were playing during that time. We did, I think, 4 tours during that 3-year layoff. And then took about 11 months to do the album. So that was about the time span,